Good morning, everybody. Today is the 13th day in the month of July 2022. My name is Heritage Desal, Markets Analyst at HFM Nigeria. And as always, we check through the markets, find out what the overall sentiment is, if it provides opportunities, and then how we can take advantage of it. But please remember that this is just a communication material. Nothing in this communication contains or should be considered as investment advice or investment recommendation. Users acknowledge that investment in FX and CFD products is characterized by a certain degree of uncertainty, and that any investment of this nature involves a high level of risk for which users are solely responsible and liable. Now, what we have this morning in terms of the overall market environment is a very mixed, lackluster, indecisive market environment, right? After Monday's massive downside in risk assets, yesterday was a bit sluggish, and today we're continuing that light, right? For example, if you look at the likes of, US 500 is basically flat across board, right? Yes, overall environment mostly mixed, movements are mostly slow, tepid moves, sluggish flows around as well. This has been on back of lack of any fresh particular catalyst, right? Later today, though, we have a couple of data points expected on the wires, particularly inflation, right? That could provide, some sparks, right, in the market. For now, there's mostly a mixed flow. Now, I had this written down earlier. I said indecision ahead of US CPI. Lackluster started today's trading, right? As major asset classes trade mix, and then we are seeing tepid flows across board amidst the lack of fresh catalysts. Hopefully, US CPI data and the Bank of Canada meeting can change this lack of catalyst right later in the day. On the US equity future side, mostly sluggish so far today. US 500 is barely changed, right? Just above the 820 level, right? You look at the broader equity space, mostly mixed, some up, some down, right? Oil prices too as well. Commodities generally are also mixed, but oil price particularly trying to pair some of the downside that we had in yesterday's session. UK oil just pips back above, $100 per barrel, but barely nothing tangible to hold on to on that front. And then you look at early today, we had the RBNZ rate meeting. Yes, they hiked interest rate by 50 basis points, but that in itself as well was not strong enough, to cause any major market reaction, mostly muted reaction from the meeting. As I'd already said on Monday from the radio show that, they will hike, they expect to hike, but even when they hike, we don't expect so much reaction. We don't expect it to have a long lasting effect on the likes of the NZD, right? But that's how we had that play out. And apart from that, their general overall language was mostly unchanged, basically the same thing they've always said, still stressing some of the concerns. So there's that. Later today, we have the Bank of Canada rate meeting as well. Expect to hike by 75 basis points. So there's also that to, wait for, expect. But, in terms of expectations, like full-blown market reactions, right? They would hike by 75 basis points. Like very likely that happens. If they do, most likely you won't get so much. If they hike by more, which is very unlikely, well, that could provide some upside for the card, but I don't even expect, so much from this right now. Although a hike, a hawkish stance could help the Canadian dollar up. But don't forget that oil prices have been making, it's way lower on the back of, growth concerns, COVID concerns. So, I mean, that affects the card in itself, even though there's been some form of reduction in that correlation between oil and Canadian dollar, but it's still on our mind, still want to look out for. But so far, convictions are really low. You look at the FX space as well. Overall mixed flow is still very much evident, and then the moves are mostly marginal. Right, looking at the weaker currencies so far, Euro is still one of the laggards in today's session. GPY is also one of the laggards. Dollar strength has also contributed to that. Look at the dollar index also making its way higher, at levels that's been last seen like 20 years, maybe back to like 2002, thereabouts, right? So there's that. But the moves are still marginal. Euro USD is making its way, or was making its way back for parity level. That's the 1.000 level, right? Which was tested yesterday's session. It made its way close today, but so far in the last couple of minutes has also pulled back away from it. We're just seeing so much push and pull in market so far, which makes that which was traders should also be very cautious with that. Now, if we have a very hot CPI data for the US later today, that could obviously make us head and move and clear through, the parity level in line with dollar strength. But clearly, there's one to watch out for in today's session. On the stronger side, pounds and AUD were leading the majors, not so long ago when I wrote this, but even those are still marginal. The moves are barely unchanged. The biggest mover, euro and pounds, the moves about 0.22% thereabouts, really tiny there. So I said markets are indecisive so far today, as clearly seen in movements across asset classes. But don't forget that the overall sentiment remains on the weaker side. Dollar strength overall remains evident. So that means that as traders, you want to also be very, attentive to that, especially when we have CPI heading into the session. Now, from CPI, the yearly print expected to come in at 8.8%, up from 8.6%. While the monthly print expected to come in at 1.1%, up from 1% as well, for the month of June. Now, inflation numbers generally, and there's been some calls that we may get for, we are already heading for, or we are already at a peak where we'll get to see that from these numbers. The Federal Reserve's, key focus in terms of inflation numbers is PCE, but clearly this would also give us insight. Hot print as well will also justify what the Federal Reserve has been doing, and clearly that remains a supportive factor for the dollar. So we'll have to also see how that plays out as well in today's session. And then we have BOC rate meeting to look out for. Let's just come through. Now, a quick picture of what we have in terms of the overall environment. This is the US 500, that's the US 500 futures. A very good gauge of what the equity market is saying, basically unchanged at 0.08% so far today, flat up as well. You look at the Nasdaq as well, also barely changed in today's session, although the FTSE has seen strong downside, and then this has also been in line with the weaker or the strain on the UK economy in terms of growth, in terms of political stress. There's been about 7 or 8 conservatives also vying for the post of PM. Leading the charge is Chancellor Sunak. So there's a former Chancellor Sunak, actually. So there is that to look out for. But, that's on the upside. Look at the JPN, Japanese index, basically net unchanged as well in today's session, right? This gives you a picture of where we are in terms of asset classes. Oil prices, yes, trying to make a comeback, just slight pairing of the losses that we had in yesterday's session that has been on the back of demand worries, growth concerns, COVID concerns as well in China. So clearly that has saw oil prices make strong downside. But in today's session, we're seeing a little bit of pullback for UK oil, for example, pulling back above this $100 key level. But even that has not even been able to hold so long. With momentum to the upside, slowing down, we're way back towards this key level, right? The VIX itself showing that overall unchanged, mixed environment. And in environments like this, you want to be more patient, more cautious. I'm not looking to jump into what you're saying. I'm more on the cautious side, right? Looking into what we have. Now, just a quick one looking at the dollar, Euro US. This is the level of parity that we're talking about. The key 1.000 level. Now, yesterday's session, we came very close and basically tested the level, right? Today, we've come close as well, even though we've also bounced off it. But generally, on change levels, we're basically just where we started the day at 0.01 level, right? Basically unchanged. And then you see a lot of push and pull in market prices. So hopefully when we get CPI, we could get a spark in markets. Hot CPI should be supportive for the dollar, give further downside for Euro USD, further strength for USD JPY. But in the meantime, keeping it simple, keeping it clean is a very good way that I like to play this. Like I said on the calendar, it's mostly CPI data for the US. I'm expecting also the Bank of Canada rate meeting. Now, they expected to hike rates by about 75 basis points, but let's hear from the statement as well as the conference in what they have to say generally, on the back of that. So we're going to leave it at that. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. And we'll always do our best to help. Thank you. Do enjoy the rest of the training session. Bye for now.